Salve mates, I hope everything is covered in Tuscan sunshine at your end. In this second part I will be ranking the Roman Empire's enemies from the most gentle to the deadliest. It will be based on 4 criteria: battles, will to fight or belligerence, threat and diplomatic unreliability. The battle's value is simple: the more and deadliest battles, the more Roman body count, the higher the score. Because not every engagement between barbarians and Romans ended up with a decisive battle, the other measure is included: will to fight and or belligerence. If Rome attempted to conquer the nation, the metric is will to fight. It measures the ability of the faction to defend themselves against Rome. If Rome didn't attempt to conquer a faction, the belligerence of the nation is considered. The higher the frequency of attacks on Rome, the higher the score. Threat to Rome is based entirely on how the other faction threatened the Roman existence and the undisputed reign over the Mediterranean. You can have an extremely belligerent nation that constantly attacked Rome, but since those attacks affected distant provinces only, the threat score will not be higher, no matter how frequent those attacks were. The final criteria, diplomatic unreliability, is a condition that shows whether the nation upheld the treaties it had with Rome, how stable its government was, and whether the faction managed to coexist with the Romans. So without further ado, let's get to the weakest nation that was fool enough to challenge the power of the ancient Roman Empire. Raetia, Norricum and Nabataean kingdom. Both Raetia and Norricum were incorporated into the Roman Empire territories, with Augustus playing a pivotal role. Raetia and Norricum, kingdoms in modern Switzerland, Austria and Slovenia, became Roman provinces in 16 BC. These conquests were resolved in just a year and a half without any subsequent resistance or rebellions, making them easiest provinces to conquer. The Nabataean kingdom had a similar fate. In 106, the Emperor Trajan incorporated the Nabataean territories into the Roman province of Arabia, again without any resistance. Barbaric tribes. After the fall of Carthage, the Romans gradually took control of North Africa and the Berber land became part of the Roman province. While there were periods of conflict and resistance, especially during the Roman expansion, there were much more instances of cooperation. Many barbaric tribes allied with the Romans, serving in the Roman military, and barbaric Septimius Severus even became a Roman emperor. Also, prominent Christian figures such as Saint Augustine emerged in Roman North Africa. Also, Berber troops were often recruited into the Roman military. The Romans recognized the martial skills of certain barbaric tribes and enlisted them in the Roman army. The spread of Christianity during the 3rd and the 4th centuries also had a positive impact on the Roman-Berber relationship. North Africa became a significant center for early Christian communities. Given the lack of military confrontations between barbaric tribes and Romans, we can safely conclude that barbaric tribes were bigger allies of Rome than its enemies. This is also underlined by the fact that Roman Africa wasn't conquered by barbaric tribes, but by Vandals, who had migrated all across to Europe just to get there. The Burgundians, the most educated, noble, loyal and relatively harmless among the Germanic tribes, were Burgundians. When they invaded Roman Gaul in 410, they were allowed to settle, but in exchange they had to defend the empire against much more belligerent enemy, the Alemanni. Their feudality status can be therefore considered as a complete success for Western Rome, as the Alemanni did not attack the empire a single time during the Burgundian-Roman alliance between 413 and 457. Burgundians betrayed Rome only twice. The first time they had done so was in 432, when they were then obliterated from the face of the earth by the Huns, and then in 457, when Rome had already been nothing but a shadow of its former glory. Social-wise, Burgundians were good Catholic Christians. They adopted Roman laws, proven by Lex Burgundianum, a Burgundian law code issued in 472. All in all, Burgundians were the most gentle faction Romans could wish for. Unfortunately for them, there were others.
XVI. We're wrong again.
So this is it.
Armenia. A kid of divorced parents who kept fighting about who gets custody, stealing it from a kindergarten and manipulating it against the other parent. And this whole time the kid doesn't get to say who they want to stay with. That was Armenia in the antiquity. Romans versus Parthians and Persians kept fighting over the control over Armenia since the end of the Mithridatic Wars. It was the most frequent casus belli between those factions, and there weren't many direct Roman-Armenian confrontations. After the Romans had defeated Armenian King Tigranes during the Third Mithridatic War, Armenia became a Rome's protectorate for some time. Trajan even managed to turn Armenia into a province in a single swift campaign. That didn't last long, as Hadrian returned Armenia its independence. It would be difficult to describe the whole Roman, Parthian, Persian, Armenian wars over the centuries. Armenia switched their allegiance from Rome to Parthia/Persia 20 times between 66 BC and AD 476, but mostly remained under control of Rome. Overall, it was painful to keep strategic Armenia under the Roman control, but that was due to the belligerence of Parthia and Persia, not because Armenians were particularly threatful or brave. Britons. The conflict between the Britons and Romans is primarily associated with the Roman conquest of Britain during the 1st century AD. In 43 AD, Emperor Claudius initiated the Roman invasion of Britain, seeking to incorporate the island into the Roman Empire. The initial resistance by the Britons during the Claudian invasion, led by tribal leaders like Caractacus and later Queen Boudica, posed some challenges to the Roman legions. Caractacus fiercely opposed the Roman forces for several years before being captured in 51 AD. After the battle, the primary Briton resistance collapsed. Queen Boudica famously led a significant uprising against Roman rule in 61 AD, resulting in the destruction of several Roman settlements, including Londinium, before her forces were defeated. It is important to note, however, that Boudica mostly killed unarmed civilians, and her forces were then crushed quickly after they had met an armed Roman resistance. It is difficult to find anything magnificent about the Brittonic tribes' resistance against Rome, which is why you see them so low on the list. Caledonians. Picts in Caledonia, today Scotland, were probably the smallest nation that wasn't conquered by Rome. It was also a nation that had the most excessive defense system set up against someone who was not that dangerous. Consider this: a Hadrian wall, a defense fortification 117 kilometers long, stone wall, ditches, 20,000 legionnaires from all over the world to defend what? Britain, the poorest province of the empire, against whom? Caledonians, who were not that numerous and not that belligerent. Britain still got sacked, nevertheless, not as much by Caledonians, but rather by Saxon pirates. Picts were the secondary threat compared to these Germanic barbarians. Their low threat is underlined by a battle between Roman commander Agricola and Caledonians in the Battle of Mons Graupis in AD 83. 30,000 Romans against the same number of Picts clashed in a battle that ended up with a bloodbath for the Caledonian natives, while Romans allegedly lost only 300 legionnaires. The triumph Agricola was awarded with didn't change the fact that Caledonia remained untamed. Not even the brilliance of Agricola and then of Septimius Severus could change Caledonian independence. Saxons. Romans had a decent relationship with the Saxons. The Saxons often joined Roman legions as foederati, which is also proven by the inventory of all Roman armies. Saxons were also used as a personal bodyguards of Emperor Constantius II, and they sided with Rome in the Battle of Catalaunian Fields. In return, Saxons sacked only the poorest provinces and regions of the Roman Empire, like Northern Gaul and especially Britain. Saxons were totally obsessed with sacking Britain. Romans, of course, had to build fortresses in Britain. They couldn't look like they don't give a damn at all, but given the ratio of plundering of Britain by Saxons, we can safely assume that the Litus Saxonicum didn't do a very good job. Cherusci and Chatti. When you mention those two Germanic tribes, you can only think of Teutoburg Forest Battle in 89. A battle where Chatti and Cherusci annihilated 3 legions and halted the Roman conquest of Germania forever. Although the subsequent Roman retribution campaign maintained their dominance in the region, Cherusci and Chatti had opened Pandora's box of Germanic resistance. Although these two tribes had caused a historic setback for the Romans, their terrifying presence did not last for long. Cherusci were absorbed by Chatti a couple of decades later after the Teutoburg Forest, and Chatti then disappeared altogether in the 2nd century. The Rhine threat torch was passed to an enemy that lasted much longer and presented a more significant threat: Alemanni. Parthia. Whether Romans were on good terms or bad terms with them, Parthia always wanted to remain friends, no matter what. During the Mithridatic Wars, Parthia even helped the Romans against Armenia, and one time Parthia even asked Emperor Augustus in 88 to appoint a new king for them, effectively making them a client state for a short period. The first direct military conflict between Rome and Parthia occurred in the 1st century BC. The Roman general Crassus suffered a disastrous defeat at the Battle of Carrhae in 53 BC. The Parthians, led by General Serena, decisively defeated the Romans, and Crassus was killed. Surprisingly, Parthia then did nothing after this Roman historical setback. Mark Antony's retribution campaign in 36 BC then ended up inconclusively, proving Parthian dominance in the Mesopotamian region. During the reign of Augustus, there were occasional clashes along the eastern border. However, the two empires also engaged in diplomacy. They established the Euphrates River as the rough boundary between their spheres of influence. Parthia missed a chance to take advantage of the last civil war of the Roman Republic after the death of Julius Caesar and to drive out Romans from the Middle East. Parthian inaction turned Carrhae into a single major military success the Parthians enjoyed against Rome. The two larger follow-up Roman-Parthian wars, the Trajan and Verus wars, both ended up with a sack of Ctesiphon, the Persian capital, and a subsequent Roman victory. Luckily for Parthia, Romans had the stamina to defeat the Parthians and sack their capital, but not to conquer and control the region. With the rise of Sassanids, Romans could but despair, because from a peaceful push around Parthia, they had to defend themselves against Sassanid Persia, which was completely a different animal. Franks. Franks, meaning free people, had two phases with ancient Romans, a traveling hippies one and a settled one. During their first phase in the 3rd century, they managed to plunder such distant provinces as Mauritania and Hispania. During one of their escapades in the 3rd century, the Frankish pirates even stole Roman ships and sacked such cities as Athens, Carthage and Syracuse. Those were the first Frankish-Roman encounters. But as the Franks got older and wiser, they found out that cooperation with Romans could become fruitful. They realized their lust for robbery could be settled by plundering Roman provinces of secondary importance like Gaul and Britain. After one of their largest invasions of 355, which had been repelled by Julian the Apostate, Franks were then resettled in Roman Gaul and were made into foederati, and for the next 55 years they dutifully guarded the Rhine. Although Historia Augusta claims that the Franks broke treaties while laughing and they attacked the Roman Empire more than any other tribe, they were undoubtedly one of the most useful Roman barbaric allies. Not only because of the bravery of their mercenaries and the strategic position they had near the Rhine River, but also because of the Frankish personalities on Roman courts, who even became consuls, like Merobaudes and Dagalaiphus. But some of the Frankish characters were very shady. Arbogast, who probably assassinated the legitimate Emperor Valentinian II and led a revolt against Theodosius the Great, and Magnus Magnentius and Silvanus, both half Franks, both usurpers. Right now you can see that the Franks are very ambiguous. On the one hand, they helped Rome as foederati, defended their borders against other tribes, and provided soldiers for the Roman army, as well as commanders and politicians. On the other hand, they were the only tribe that retained their barbaric pagan heritage. They also fought on both sides in the Battle of Caledonian fields, and some of their politicians, like Arbogast, undermined the authority of the empire. One Frankish funeral epigram near Budapest sums up the ambiguity pretty well. I'm two things: a Frankish citizen and a Roman soldier. Sarmatians. The excellent horsemen of the antiquity, great mercenaries and, compared to the Germans, a secondary threat for Rome. Those were Sarmatians. They rarely attacked Rome alone. What they usually did was that they teamed up with some other Germanic tribe and filled the role of supported assault force. This is how they played a crucial role in the Battle of Adrianople, for example. 3 Sarmatic tribes shaped Roman history: Roxolani, Jazyges, and Alans, aka the good, the bad, and the ugly. Roxolani were the good guys. They helped Trajan during the Dacian wars, provided a ton of mercenaries during the 2nd century, and rarely attacked Rome. Out of the Sarmatian 3, they were the most helpful. The Jazyges were the bad ones, the most belligerent of all 3. Although we call them Marcomannic wars, at one point the Jazyges were the primary target of the Romans, because unlike Marcomanni, they just didn't stop attacking and plundering. During the crisis of the 3rd century, they created the most amount of problems when they teamed up with the Goths and sacked the Balkan provinces many times. The Alans were the ugly, the most complicated ones, sometimes good, sometimes bad. They provided Rome with a lot of Hellenic mercenaries, the best horsemen in the antiquity. Still, their invasion of Hispania in 406 was a nail in the coffin of Western Rome. Until they were put down by the Goths, Alans were the most potent force in Hispania. Their importance then diminished quickly, and in just a decade, they dispersed among the Vandals. The Jews. The Jews haven't got along with other nations in human history. They didn't get along with Egyptians, Greeks, Seleucids and Persians, and they certainly didn't get along with the Romans. However, at first the Romans and Jews had a very warm relationship. The Jews didn't make any problems when Pompey the Great basically marched into Jerusalem without any resistance and ended the existence of an independent Hasmonean kingdom. As a retribution to the Jewish cooperation, Romans were very tolerant. Jews didn't have to swear an oath to the emperor. Roman legions also didn't use military insignia in Jerusalem, not to provoke Jews, who were also allowed to run a sort of quasi-self-government over Judea. But sometime during the era of Nero, the Roman governors got brazen with the Jewish population, and they started to impose taxes on the Jews. This led to a spiral of violence between Rome and the Jews, 3 destructive wars and many hostilities that ended only with the Arabs kicking out Romans from the Middle East in the 7th century. All 3 Jewish-Roman wars ended up in a bloodbath for the Jews, but they tested the Roman siege war waging capabilities as well as Roman patience to the absolute limit. The Jews were fanatically opposed to the Romans, willing to sacrifice their lives for their faith even when they were outnumbered. During the siege of Masada in 73, they also preferred mass suicide to captivity. Luckily for the Romans, Jewish rebellions didn't affect larger areas, and they didn't have a significant impact on the empire. The only exception was the Kitos War, which occurred in Cyprus, Alexandria, Cyrenaica and also in Mesopotamia, and heavily undermined Trajan's Parthian campaign. Overall, Jews were not that threatening, but very resilient and, unfortunately for Romans, incapable of adapting. Suebi. Suebi was a diverse group of different Germanic tribes that had the most extended history of warfare between the Romans and Germans. Already in 55 BC, during his expeditions, Caesar faced off against the Suebi under the leadership of Ariovistus. The Suebi, who were known for their military power, were a significant force of all Germanic tribes. They consisted also of other tribes such as Marcomanni and Quodi. Marcomanni helped Rome immensely after the Teutoburg Forest disaster in 89, but they caused a lot of problems during their most notable engagement during the Marcomannic Wars, a series of battles that tested the Roman military might. The Marcomanni and Quodi posed a substantial challenge to Roman control along the Danube frontier because they managed to get as far as Aquileia in Italy. The wars eventually concluded with a Roman victory, and the Suebic Marcomanni never again presented such a threat. In the 5th century, the Suebi played a prominent role in the relationship between Germanic tribes and the Roman Empire. One Suebi group crossed the Rhine River in 406, ransacked Gaul, and established the Suebic kingdom in the Iberian Peninsula. Over time, the Suebic kingdom became a significant political entity in post-Roman Iberia, engaging in diplomatic relations, conflicts and alliances with both Rome and the Goths. Their ambitions, however, never exceeded the Iberian Peninsula. Dacians. Dacians were for the Romans like the task you keep pushing away from you, procrastinating, doing other useless tasks like conquering Britain. Dacians were impudent people. The way they had treated Romans at the Danube River and got away with it for such a long period of time was indeed a sign of their dominance in the region. The relationship between the Romans and the Dacians is primarily associated with the Dacian Wars that took place in the 2nd century AD. The Dacian king at the time, Decebalus, had become a significant threat to Roman interests in the region. Trajan launched the first campaign, which resulted in a Roman victory. However, Decebalus managed to negotiate a relatively favorable peace treaty with the Romans. During the Second Dacian War, however, the tensions between the Dacians and Romans resurfaced, and Trajan broke the treaty and led an unjust war of aggression against Dacia. The coffers of the empire were empty and Trajan needed to fill them, preferably with money from an outside source, and Dacia was rich enough to do the trick. After 3 years of careful planning, Trajan invaded Dacia with 13 to 14 legions, about 100,000 men. The Roman forces were victorious, and in 106 they defeated the Dacians. Decebalus committed suicide, and the kingdom of Dacia was incorporated into the Roman Empire as the province of Dacia. This didn't mean an end for the Dacians, however, because there was one tribe that continued to be a heavy burden for the ancient Romans, the Carpi. The tribe, now considered to be of Dacian origin, the Carpi, participated in many Gothic attacks on the Roman Empire during the crisis of the 3rd century. Till 318, 3 Roman emperors claimed the title Carpicus Maximus, the victors of Carps. Only in the 4th century was the Carpian and therefore the Dacian threat gone forever. The Germanic tribe of Alemanni, meaning all men, was an extremely belligerent faction laying on the shortest possible highway to Italy. Alemanni were one of the rare instances of Roman tribes that were dangerous even without proper leadership, because Alemanni did not have a king until the 5th century. It is therefore very surprising that they didn't get to sack Rome, Mediolanum, or any other larger Italian city for that matter. It is a double surprise given how many times they had managed to cross the Alps. They were successfully repelled by Romans in such battle as the Battle of Mediolanum and Late Benacus in 260 and 268 respectively. But that didn't stop them from trying to conquer Italy again and again. Alemannic Geothungi invaded Italy in 271 and were the only enemy of Rome that defeated Emperor Aurelian, which happened in the Battle of Placentia in 271. Since no remarkable military force was left between the invaders and the capital, panic spread through the city of Rome, which had grown far beyond its old walls. Although Aurelian eventually managed to defeat Alemanni in the Battle of Pavia, they gave Rome the reality check. New walls were needed to be built. 20 kilometers long, Aurelian walls were the result of Alemannic aggression as well as Limes Romanus, the Germanic border defense in Upper Germania. The wars and battles between Rome and the Marcomanni were bloody, but the Romans came out lucky. But unlike the Goths, Alemanni weren't able to achieve either overwhelming or decisive victory over Rome. In the 4th century, Alemanni played it a little bit smoothly with the Romans. Alemannic chief Vadomar, for example, had a secret agreement with Augustus Constantius II to harass the emperor's subordinate Caesar Julian the Apostate in Gaul. Wadomir was eventually captured by Julian and became a successful commander in the east against the Sassanids. Alemanni were then much more peaceful in the 5th century and conquered some parts of Gaul only during the last days of ancient Rome. The Huns, the destructive and unstoppable force that annihilated anything it touched, razed cities to the ground and left nothing but a devastation behind them. Nothing at all what the real Huns were really like. Huns were like any other barbaric faction. They created vassals and they loved getting tributes, especially from the Eastern Romans. We don't know why, but for some reason Huns really disliked Eastern Romans and loved Western Romans. They attacked Eastern Rome multiple times throughout the 5th century. Even when Attila got tons of cash from Constantinople and even got to call Theodosius II his slave, he still attacked Eastern Roman provinces from time to time just to remind them that the East belonged to him. Only with the rise of Emperor Marcianus, who had refused to pay Attila ransom, the tides changed. Attila then inexplicably attacked the West, maybe to knock them out so he could deal with Constantinople once and for all, we cannot say. But the important thing is that up until then, Western Romans and the Huns had maintained a great relationship. In 437, for example, the Huns annihilated the Burgundians for them. 6 years later, they helped the last great Roman general Aetius return to power after he had been ousted by other Roman nobles from Ravenna. Western Romans indeed had a great relationship with the Huns, and they frequently used Hunnic mercenaries against other barbarians. In 408 they even formed an alliance, so the Huns could sack Eastern Roman Thrace in peace. In 451, however, Attila turned on the West for some reason, and the fragile empire could barely repel them in the famous Battle of the Nations, Battle of the Caledonian Plains. The Hunnic danger was stopped only partially, because the very next year Attila ransacked northern Italy and destroyed Aquileia and Mediolanum. Whether it was a plague, famine, or Pope Leo's I's insanely high speech scales that halted Attila's march on Rome is unknown, but he returned to his homeland in Pannonia unsuccessful. Neither Eastern nor Western Roman emperor would ever call the Hunnic king their master. The single failed campaign, combined with the death of Attila in 453 and subsequent succession struggles between his sons, led to the demise of the Hunnic Empire, which dissolved in 454. Huns might have subdued neither Constantinople nor Ravenna or Persian Ctesiphon, but they managed to conquer all Scythian, Sarmatian and Germanic tribes between the rivers of Don and Rhine, which made them a force to be reckoned with. Vandals. Vandals share the fate of all bullies across the centuries. They were soft-spoken people. Procopius called them the most gentle among all barbarians, who were heavily bullied. So, therefore, they took their frustrations out on people who had nothing to do with their misery. Vandals were bullied by Gepids in Pannonia, Franks and Huns in Germania, and by Suebi and Goths in Hispania. This caused Vandals trauma, and Romans were supposed to be their victims. But first things first, Vandals didn't share a lot of fights with Romans before their great departure in 406, because they were busy being pushed around by other nations around them. In 406, Vandals broke through Roman lines with Alans and Suebi and ransacked Gaul. According to Hieronymus, they burned down and desecrated churches, raped and looted all along the way to Hispania, where they settled in 410. However, in Hispania, Vandals were in precarious situation. They kept being bullied by Suebi and Goths, and they didn't get along well with Rome. In 429 they moved yet again, and this time to Roman Africa, which had been kept defenseless for quite some time, and conquered it. Vandalic leader Gaiseric, according to Jordanes, was a limping man of a few words filled with hate. Romans tried to make Vandals a foederati, an allied state, but Vandals were the most treacherous of all factions. They never respected the foederati treaty, and agreeing to terms with the Romans was just a militaristic timeout for them. They never offered the Romans any kind of military aid, and fanatical Arian Vandals never ceased oppressing Roman Catholics in Africa, as they turned Catholic churches into stables. Unlike other tribes which intended to adopt the Roman culture in one way or another, Vandals wanted to eradicate anything remotely Latin. Gaiseric even abolished Roman consul dating and founded a new one based on his own government's time. By some, Vandals were perceived as a rightful punishment for Roman degeneracy, at least according to Salvianus, who made a claim. After Vandal conquest of Carthage in 439, a city full of brothels and taverns, filled with male prostitutes who liked to dress in women's clothing. In 455, the Vandals certified their status as savages of the late antiquity when they sacked defenseless Rome, which in terms of destruction was far more severe than the Gothic one in 410. Both Roman attempts to reconquer Africa ended up disastrously. Emperor Majorian's ships were burned down by Vandals before the invasion could even begin, and the Eastern Roman fleet was destroyed in the Battle of Cape Bon in 469. Western Rome then collapsed 8 years after this battle, and the scheming Vandals harassed the Mediterranean for the next 60 years. Persia. Sassanid Persia was like Parthia, on cocaine and mixed with crystal meth. Persians were not as weak as Parthians, who always saw the defeat of the Roman armies as a chance for fruitful peace negotiations and cooperation. Sassanids may have had their capital, Ctesiphon, sacked 2 times during the reign of Emperor Carus and Maximian. Still, they always managed to shake it off, patiently wait, and then strike when Rome least expected it. They defeated such emperors as Gordian III, Constantius II, and Julian. Their absolute masterpiece, however, was the capture of Emperor Valerian. Hundreds of Roman senators, knights, and commanders ended up in Persian captivity in 260, an undisputed highlight of Persian dominance in the region. However, Persians don't have an exceptionally high threat score, because they really never got further than Syria and Cilicia in their conquests. It is surprising, but they did not take the opportunity of the collapsing Roman Empire in the 3rd century to capture key provinces like Anatolia or Egypt. They permanently settled for plundering of Syria and moving the borders slightly away from their capital. However, Persian cocaine belligerence didn't last the whole antiquity. During the 5th century, when the West fell to barbaric invasions, Persia played a vital role in maintaining a peaceful relationship with Constantinople. Eastern Rome could therefore focus on the defense of Thracia against the Huns, Goths, and other barbaric vermin. Goths. Goths could be also called "we didn't mean to." They didn't mean to kill a Roman emperor in the Battle of Abritus in 251. They just wanted to sack Moesia, and Emperor Decius tried to stop them. They didn't really intend to burn down the Temple of Artemis, one of the 7 wonders. They just wanted to strip all the booty, and the temple caught on fire. They didn't really mean to kill a Roman emperor again in 378 in the Battle of Adrianople. They only tried to escape being enslaved by the Huns, so they resettled in the Roman Empire. Things got heated and Goths just defended themselves, accidentally flanked the Roman army during the battle, crushed 7 legions, and accidentally set a house on fire where Emperor Valens was hiding. By no means they wanted to sack Rome in 410 and receive the attention of all the Western Roman forces that could otherwise guard the Rhine River against other barbaric tribes. No, their king Alaric just wanted recognition and foederati status. They really wanted to serve Rome, and the sack of Rome was just an accident. After they had moved to Aquitania, they didn't mean to conquer Arelati, to cut off the land connection between Hispania and Gaul. No, they just needed a naval base in the Mediterranean, which is why they laid siege to the city only 7 times. When they defeated the Suebians in Hispania, of course they wanted to give the land back to the Romans, of course they did. But no one asked them to give it back. You might be getting the picture I portray here. Goths didn't want to harm Rome, their intention was indeed a cooperation, but it was impossible to tame the Gothic flame by weak Romans. Both Arcadius and Honorius were burned by the flame, but their father Theodosius used the Gothic flame to his advantage against usurpers. Also Aetius used Goths against Attila, effectively saving the Western Rome. Eventually the flame got too hard to handle, and the Gothic flame became bigger than the empire itself. The late Western Roman emperors like Avitus didn't need acclamation either from the Senate or from the legions, but from the Goths. The Gothic flame eventually burned Rome in 476 after hundreds of years of devastation. Therefore, they rightfully deserve the #1 spot on the list of the enemies of the Roman Empire. So mates, this is the final nation. I hope you enjoyed the video. Write me a comment about what you think. God bless you, and God bless the Roman Empire.